Okay, this is some explanation of the more technical point of how RuneScape abilities work, including the calculations and some extra effects. The first thing I want to talk about is about the order of inputs. This will come back a little bit later, but I want to do it right now. It is important in the order that you input your inputs in the tick. And if you have done any boss where you have to walk a lot, you might have noticed this. If you do ability and then you walk, or you do walk and then you input the ability, you will have seen this a difference here. It needs to autofocus. There we go. If you do the first one, then you will use your ability and then you will walk somewhere. But if you do the second one, you will only do your ability, because your walk will be interrupted by you doing an ability. And this is actually a very simple example, but this goes for pretty much anything. You've seen arrow swap, for example. If you swap your arrows and then do an ability, you'll get the new arrows. If you do it the other way around, you won't. And this is something that is going to be a little bit more relevant later on. So first, or second I suppose, we're gonna talk a bit about ability damage or base damage. This is base ability damage. This is an important stat, and you can see it if you go into the loadout menu in the hero screen, which is default hotkey F1 in the game. And then you click on abilities, you will see a number called damage. There's some formula behind this number. It is a bit obscure. There's something on the wiki. I believe it is actually incorrect for tier 100 weapons, but it should be correct for all the other weapons. Or perhaps I have made some calculation errors on my website or as analysis. But you will get within 1 or 2. So yeah, but the most important thing is this number is visible, and it has 3 components. First we have a combat level, or skill level, I suppose. And then for melee, this means strength level. Then secondly we have the weapon tier, or weapon damage tier. Weapon damage tier. And this one has a subcategory ammo tier. Ammo tier. And for melee, ammo is strength level as well, which is a bit odd. Presumably for necromancy the same is true, but you cannot have a lower necro level than necro weapon tier, so it doesn't matter. But you can have melee weapons with attack and then lower strength level. So if you're 95 attack, you can wear lance, but with 1 strength, lance will be nerfed to tier 1 damage. And then the third one is strength bonuses. These are primarily from equipment, armor, necklaces, and also from the Reaper title, Reaper crew, which gives 12, which gets multiplied by 1.5, so 18. This is a simple calculation. And then we increase this. We can write buffs maybe, buffs. Eruptive, which is the weapon perk. It used to be called Equilibrium, but they reworked it in 2024. And Equilibrium Aura. Equilibrium Aura. So you calculate this with the formulas that you find on the wiki, or you just look them up in game, and then this, you add them together. So example, e.g. Eruptive 2 plus Equilibrium Aura is 13% boost buff. So this is you add them together, and in general, if you add them together, we call them additive buffs. They should not be confused if you play any other games. Additive buff means something completely different, but in RuneScape, additive buff means that you add the two buffs together and then you multiply them. So you get 13%. So you multiply whatever you get here by 1.13. So if you have 1000 here, now you have 1130. This is weaker than if you multiply them together. And this is otherwise, because if you multiply them together, you would get 1000 times, let's say equilibrium is 1120, and then multiplied by 1.01. And then I'm just gonna grab a calculator because I don't know, 1131.2. So you would have 1.2 more base damage. Of course, for such a small example, it doesn't matter, but later on we will get some more noticeable differences. Now, what is this base ability damage? Why is this a relevant stat? Well, actually, this goes to a lot of things. First of all, it is used for abilities. Of course, most important things. Also, we have weapon poison. Weapon poison. Aftershock and the other perk. Aftershock and crackling is what it is called. Crackling. We have conjures. There's probably other things that I'm forgetting right now. There's a bunch of things kill off of this. It's a very important stat. Now, of course, everything needs to do more calculations. And there's a lot of things for that. Mostly for abilities. A lot of things only buff abilities. Weapon poison. Couple things. At the very end, we'll get to some things that are buffed by weapon poison. Aftershock and crackling. Also a couple things. They're not actually calculated the same way, unfortunately, but we get to them a little bit later on again. Conjures I want to explain a little bit more. Basically what the game does is, whenever you spawn a conjure, it will look at your base ability damage, and it will spawn the conjure with that base ability damage. This means if you do something crazy, if you went from best in slot, which would be reasonable best in slot, to 2712 ability damage for necromancy, so then it would spawn conjure with 2712. If you then went to, let's say, so you player 2712, and then you spawn a conjure, and then swap gear to, I don't know, now you're at 2000, because, I don't know, you go to tank armor or something. I don't think that's that big of a difference. Conjure 80. 80 is short for ability damage, which is maybe a bit confusing if you use it to animate that. It will remain at 2712. So your conjures remain strong. Yes, so this is a thing you can use. But yeah, so you can equip a shield, for example, and then you will not lose damage on your conjures. Okay, so this is a base ability damage. Very important stat, used for everything, really. Now we go to the next effect, which is also called ability damage. It's called that in game, unfortunately. And that is unfortunate. Been a lot of confusing recently with the new sunshine from the mascot armor to Mechans Resplendence. But we will go through this. So if you, now we are in the case where we are casting an ability. Casting an ability. So no weapon poison, no crackling, whatever. And then, so what is going to happen? So we have this base damage that we just had right now. Base damage. We cast something. And now things need to happen for calculations, right? First, we scale to hit chance. And hit chance is also called the damage potential nowadays. Damage potential. Right, so if you have 50% hit chance, we just take a pseudo base damage, which is 50% of what you had. And if you have 75, we take 75%. If you had 39.73%, we take 39.73%. Then we are going to add some buffs. And here we want to split into the different styles, basically. And these are called invisible, or that's what I call them, invisible base damage buffs. You can find them on the wiki page, ability damage, under this name. You can just Ctrl F and you will get the header with this. Again, this part as well is invisible. You cannot see this number anywhere. You just need to calculate it, basically. So if anything in game says it buffs base damage, it will buff either the actual base damage, if it's eruptive or equilibrium, or it will buff things over here. So examples here, hex weapons, flow for magic, that is the greater sonic wave ability. Chaos Roar applies here, Chaos Roar. Scripture of a Mascot book. Also this Crumble Undead from the 110 runecrafting update. Crumble Undead. And of course this, let's call it Resplendence Sunshine. And there's a couple other things. When arrows is a very important example here, actually. I want to talk about those. When arrows. So, what does this mean? Well, not so much actually. This is just a damage buff that applies to all abilities. And the reason I said I want to talk about when arrows is, if you have used them, maybe you have noticed that the first ability you cast that proc the when arrows, they do not get hit chance buff. Why is this? Well, as you can see, we have already scaled to the hit chance. And then if the ability hits, which is usually always now, right? But back in the day you were able to splash abilities. But if the ability hits, then we're gonna apply the when arrow boost. So that means we've already done the hit chance stuff before you get the when boost. This is why the first hit does not get any hit chance buffs, but all the other ones do. You can have opinions about this, but this is the way it works, which is only the only important thing for right now. So this is invisible base damage buffs, and we can name this process here. We can call it on-cast effects, on-cast buffs, or whatever. Effects, buffs. And we'll get to this naming scheme later, because in the next section we will see a divergence between the game and the common player terminology. If you go to PVME, there will be a different terminology for the next section. But this part on a cast always. Now there's some other things that happen on cast. We can maybe put a slash here. Other effects. For example, we get exang at exang / insight fear stacks. Also necrosis stacks at what's it called, occultist ring stacks over here. Is there any other ones that I need to mention here? Probably there's some examples that I have forgotten about, but yeah, one can have here effect, if, for example, ingenuity. Unfortunately, this is only applied to the first hit. Unfortunate circumstances. Perhaps I have forgotten some examples, but the general idea is clear, and if you are uncertain about an effect, you can try to test it. I'll explain how you can test such things in a minute. Or you can ask in PVME. If they don't know, they will tag me, and then I will answer when I see it. So now we need to go to the next section. Let's see, is it centered? Yes. Well, kind of. The next section is what I call ability-specific effects. Again, you can find all these on the ability-specific effects. And these are a little bit in a limbo state. I actually have a feeling that some of these effects that we listed just now actually apply here, but I mean, it's not as clear. There's a lot of flexibility in how you draw out what happens. Of course, if you have the actual code, it will be a lot easier, but I don't, so. So what are ability-specific effects? I will just give some examples. You have a bounded damage increase. A bounded damage increase. And this, of course, is part of wreck. And in brackets, and ruin. This is part of a slice. This is part of piercing shot. Wait, is it still part of? I think it still is. This might have been removed with the combat beta in 2024, but I don't think so. Walk damage buff. Walked damage buff. This is, of course, slaughter. Combust for magic. Combust. And fragmentation shot, frag shot for ranged. But there's also other things. Conflagrate, for example. Conflagrate. If you don't know what conflagrate is, it is the effect you get if you use the War of Awakening, the Sanctum Dio-Wield special attack. You get a 15-second timer to use combust to increase the damage. There's also Song of Destruction here. Song of Destruction. That's the 30% damage boost if you have the 2 items for the 2 Sanctum weapons. We have the Carapec, wrist rep, carry reps, not weps. That is an example. Essence corruption. This is a lot of magic bleed buff. Essence corruption. Then can we get some other abilities? I think we can have, for example, necromancy, Omniguard passive. Omniguard double auto damage. I think it's called Death Spark. Not 100% certain. Or we can have Living Death LD 1.5x finger. Yes, Living Death boosts the damage of finger by 50%. This is just some examples. So here, pretty much anything, if you think I don't know where it goes, probably goes in here. So this is also part of this on cast, on hit thing, which is, so it's a bit of a limbo where we put it. And now we go to the next section, and this is actually where naming schemes get a little bit confusing. So I'm gonna make sure this paper is in the right position. Looks good. Now what happens is, now the naming scheme starts to split. So this next section we call in-game. In-game. This is on hit. So you can think of the Zorgot Soldering is called on hit, so it applies here. But actually, if you look at in PVME, for example, or popular player terminology, if you go to Lucas stream, probably, like Ivo Lucario, I mean, or maybe the RS guy, or who else is a popular streamer right now? I don't know, Omid maybe. If you check there, actually they will often call this on cast as well, same as the last one, because this happens on the cast stick. So it makes sense to call it on cast, right? But why is it then called on hit in game? Well, this is because, as we have seen earlier, we have done the check for whether or not the ability should hit. And if we get here, then the ability has hit, right? It will hit. So we call it on hit in game. This is the Jagex logic. Of course, you may have opinions about this, but I think it's good to understand that this is in game is called on hit. So if something in game says that it happens on hit, it will happen in this upcoming section. And what is an important difference between on hit and on cast? Well, actually, one of the important differences is you always only cast once, right? We cast an ability. But if we have a multi-hit, for example, Dragon Claws, it will have, oh, this is a very small box, 4 hits. And the same would be true if you, for example, tested with Zorgoth Sol Ring, which is on hit, which means that if you hit multiple targets with, for example, or if you have multi-hit ability like Volley of Souls, you will get an individual roll for the Zorgoth Sol Ring to get an extra soul. But the Occultist Ring is on cast, which means you only get one, regardless of how many targets you were to hit with Threats of Fate or multi-hit or Soul Strike or etc. Fate, the Blood Siphon general ability thing. So this is a relevant difference, and it if you understand this in-game terminology, you will instantly be able to see the difference. Do we get one roll? Do we get multiple rolls for the effect? It is a nice thing to know. Now, we have to now split this on-hit section in two as well. Unfortunately, they are both called on-hit in the terminology I was given by Jagex employees. But actually, we can subdivide it into two. And this is an important subdivision because, well, we will see later why, but this is something that gets used quite often in game, but is not really understood. So we are going to subdivide this into two. The first part we are going to call on hit. The second part we are going to call on core, or in core, of course with a C, on core, or in core. Now what the hell does this mean? Well, all these hits we have here, we can draw some boxes, hit, and it doesn't matter how many we have. Hit. It will be the same if we have one, but then of course it's not so interesting. What's going to happen is going to calculate all of these, and then it says, okay, now Mr. Core is your turn. And then it's going to calculate all these cores. Core. Oops, core. How many do I have? 6 core. So it goes all of this, and then it does all of this. And why is this important? Well, this we will see when we get to the encore. But this is basically how it works. So we do all this stuff first, and then we do all this stuff. But now let's see what actually is happening in this on-hit section. What is the relevance of this? And then I need a new paper. Looks good. So, the first thing we are going to do is we have this damage number. Remember the ability damage that we have just calculated, the base damage, the boosted base, whatever. We're just gonna call it base damage right now. And this we need to multiply with 2 numbers, and these 2 numbers you can see in game. we're going to multiply it with the minimum. Oh, the autofocus is very bad right now. Autofocus. It's a button on my camera. Oh, it works. Beautiful. We're going to do two things. We're going to calculate the min damage, also called the fixed damage, and the var damage. And then var is variable. So in game you will notice that you have a min and a max damage, but actually max damage is not really a thing, not a singular thing at least. Max is just min plus var. So if your necromancy basic attack does 90 to 110 damage, it actually means it does 90% minimum damage or fixed damage and 20% variable damage. And this is just a multiplication, right? So 90 or 0.9 times whatever base damage we calculated. And then, congratulations, you have your minimum damage. But of course there's many buffs, as you probably know, that apply here. Let's give some examples. So first we get what are called style specific buffs. This section is called style specific, but it is basically range buffs actually. I don't know why. The only non-range buff is the gemstone armor effect and the legacy mode buff. But you should not be using legacy, please. Thank you very much. It makes my work more difficult. So here we have most ammunition, most ammo for ranged. Right, so full arrows, enchanted bolts, but also ceramic armor, gemstone armor, and also we have a Pernix quiver. And Pernix quiver boosts your max damage by 4%. So what does this mean? So this means var is 1.04 times min plus var. Maybe I should use square brackets here. Yes, so this is not right. Sorry, I made a silly mistake. Var is equal to var plus 0.04 times min plus var. Yes, because this is your max damage, so you take 4% of that and you add it to the variable damage. That is just a technical point of view of how to say this. Then, once we have done this, we go to precise. Precise is the perk that you can put on your gear. So it applies it here. And precise, again, we have something like this. So you increase the minimum damage by 9% or 1.5% per level. And of your maximum damage, that is. So you do the same thing here, but min is min plus 9% times min plus 4. That's what it does, basically. And yeah, that's it, basically. Do you have the same variable component to your abilities? I'm blanking now if it also lowers your var damage, but I will just look it up on the RSA code right now. That might have been the old Techrolibrium perk that I'm thinking of right now. Calculator. Damage calc. Precise. Let's see. Min hit gets increased. Okay, so the var hit doesn't in fact get decreased, so it will lower this var by 9% of the max hit. Of course, this can mean that your var goes to 0 or lower than 0, and then it is just set to 0. The game does not explode. Well, hopefully at least. So yeah. So now we have added precise as a perk, and now we have some some more effects, of course, and these are additive buffs. Additive. Again, this is different type of additive than what they are in most games. Additive buffs means if you have buff 1 to have whatever number you have here, min, and then you do basically you multiply by 1 plus buff 1 plus buff 2 plus buff 3 plus, you know, however many you have, and you do the same thing for the variable 1 plus buff 1 plus buff 2 plus buff 3, etc. So again, this is a weaker damage buff than if you just multiply them. So if you have 2 of these buffs, you effectively get slightly less than you might expect from if you have 2 of the same types of same percentage buffs in different places. Some notable examples are the Blood Tithe, which is exsanguinate. I will just write exsanguinate because that's the name most people know. Fall Book, the Scripture of Fall, but also the Flamebound Rival, which is the EZK 12% damage buff. There was Ruby Aurora, maybe not so much used by except by top-end PVMers, but yeah. These are probably the most notable examples. Also, maybe this Gravitate is a good example. Gravitate. It's the Tier 87 Wilderness melee weapon thing. I forgot what it's called. And actually, probably the most important example is Gloves of Passage. The next hit buff. Gloves of Passage. Very often used. For Havoc or Smash, it boosts your next hit or your next ability. Well, I mean, let's not go into how they work, it's very confusing. But yeah, so it is additive. So if you have multiple of these, so if you have EZK and Ghost of Passage, probably the most common combination, you don't get 12% buff and then I think it's 16% buff, but you get 28% buff instead. So slightly less buff than you would expect, maybe. Then we can go on, and now we go to multiplicative buffs. Multiplicative buffs. Multiplicative buffs. Here we have all sorts of things. This is your prayers, Sun, Swift, Zerg, ZGS, DBA. Here most stuff applies really. Revenge, very beautiful. What else do we have? We have Bane equipment, Bane gear, Slayer helmet, genocidal self, Emmy, whatever, right? You can look at the wiki to find out these effects. Now, okay, I have given a bunch of examples, different types of buffs, but actually probably something that is very important to know about these buffs on this on-hit section is on-hit means does not affect bleeds. Bleeds do not happen in do not care about on hit. They have already done their thing. They only care about this on cast section. This is why this name differential is also quite nice. Should have mentioned this at the beginning, but I forgot, so yeah, well, unfortunate. So this is the regular on hit part that we discussed earlier. Now we go to this core part. Right, so now we discuss a little bit about what is going on over here. So I've already set it will first do the on hit and then the core part, right? Okay, with, or then maybe why not just do on hit and then the core? Well, I don't know actually, but I can explain in more detail now why this is important. After every ability, you have your on hits. On hits, you have a bunch. Here, I will write core 1. Well, I will explain what this means exactly in a second. Here, other shit, other inputs. Core 2. What does this mean? So here we have the on-hit stuff that we have just discussed in some detail. Hit 2, hit 3, right? Whatever. Here we have core 1. What happens here is two things happen. If AoE ability, and this means either the ability is AoE in and of itself, Greco, cleave, whatever, or you are, for example, using Threats of Faith or Chinchompas to make the ability AoE. If AoE ability, skip. Presumably it selects targets here or something, but if AoE ability, we can skip this part. Otherwise, calculate. Otherwise, calculate core for hit 1. Yes, so if you have 3 hits, it will calculate the core belonging to this hit 1. And that's all it will do for now. Then it goes to other inputs. This is quite simple. Handle all other player inputs for this tick. Yeah, so if you, popular example, with Greco here, we do example here. So this input plus Death Spore equip. Death Spore equip. Right, so we get 7 hits. This is an AoE ability. AoE. Skip. Core 1. Equip. Death Spore. Arrows. Now core 2, this is quite simple. Calculate all other cores. Now here it's going to do core 1 to 7 because we skipped the first one, so, or we skipped the first option because it's AoE build. So now we get core 1 to 7. Okay, now we have discussed this part. What does this mean? Well, a bunch of stuff happens in the core. One thing is critical strikes. This is why if you Greco and then equip Death Spores, you will get 7 attempts at getting a Death Spore arrow stack. Because if you get a critical strike, you get a stack. And this means that when we get here, in this core, where the critical strikes happen, we will have Death Spore arrows equipped. So the game will say, okay, we have Death Spore arrows, we crit, give this person a stack, even though it was not what we had equipped when we get the hits. And this is why the separation of hits and cores is so important, because a bunch of things have this difference, right? And we can give a same example with Debo is also quite popular, right? Debo, Death Spore plus Death Spore. Equip. 2 hits. Core 1. Equip Death Spore. Equip D-Spore. Core 2. So here we have D-Spores. So here we can get a Death Spore stack. But here we do not have Death Spores. So we cannot get a Death Spore stack. So only here do we get the effect. You also get the 3% critical strike chance from the death scores, in case you were wondering. But you do not lose the old effect because it has already been handled. So this is a nice example, and actually I want to give a second example which is even more confusing. It is a bulk example. You can very simply test this. Go to, for example, two stack bulk plus spec active, right? The 30 seconds 4 stack thing. Cast Greco. Yes. So now you get 2 plus 7 is 9, which is just 1 modulo 4. So you get 2 procs. 2 bulk procs. So we can look in more detail from an intuitive point of view. What happens is we get the second hit procs 1, so we get Greco 2 intuitive. Greco 2 proc, and then Greco 6 proc. Greco 6 proc. Yes, so this is the weak hit, and this is the second medium hit. Actual, what happens? 2 times Greco, whatever, the weak 1 proc. I think it might be 7. Greco 7, top of my head. But what the hell is happening here? Well, on hit, in the hit part, we get 2 Greco procs plus 2 Greco procs. Then, when we are calculating the core, remember we get core 2 here, because we have a AoE ability. Well, when you calculate, it's a late core, right? The core 2, also called a late core, or late hit as well sometimes. Well, what happens here is that we get we set the damage for the bulk proc. Set the bulk damage. Yeah, no, so it is Greco 6 that procs here. I'm sorry. I had a little bit of a brain misfortune. Set the bulk damage, but for some reason it will override this Greco 2 proc with the Greco 6 proc. Greco 6 proc. Yes, so this is this 33 to 37% damage. It gets locked in here, so to say, right before the critical strikes. You can check the wiki. So it means if your regular hit crits, your bulk damage is not based on the critical damage, the critical hit damage. But yeah, so it will override. And you can do this with much more interesting thing. For example, this is not so good, right? Because you lose damage. Here you can see that the strong one gets replaced by the weak one. But okay, we can maybe use this to our advantage. 3 stack bulk, 3 stacks, plus spec. Yes, spec active. Stall Greco. If you don't know what stalling is, then you can go to PVME and you can go to the website, Google, not Google, but use the search thing, stalling, or you can go ask in the PVME help channels. Very, very helpful people in the PVME Discord. They will help a lot. Stall Greco, release plus Debo. What happens here? Well, now we have 8 late cores, right? The Greco and the second Debo hit. We get 3 procs. We have 7 plus 2 is 9. So we get 3 plus 9 is 12, which is 0 modulo 4 with 3 procs. So what happens now is actually Well, this first Debo gets early core, right? So proc 1 Debo. Or maybe we should do intuitive first, sorry. Intuitive. Greco 1 proc, right? That's the first stack. And then Greco 5 proc. And then Greco 6, Greco 7, Debo 1, Debo 2. Debo 2 proc. Actual 3 times Debo proc. Yes, makes sense, right? 8 late cores, 1 early core. Early core. So early core is core 1, late core is core 2. So we get proc 1, Debo 1. I'm not 100% sure if it gets overwritten actually, but I believe you get just the early core. Proc 2. Well, Debo will overwrite again, so Debo 2. Proc 3, well, Greco or Debo, proc 3, Debo will overwrite again, so we get Debo 2 again. So now we have somehow 3 Debo procs from, this one might be 1 or 2, I'm not 100% sure actually, I never tested this. Now we get 3 Debo procs, but we only get 2 Debo hits in the one ability. This is a very interesting event, right? Well, because like, why is this a thing? But yeah, this is how you can get some advantage out of it. But from a technical point of view, if you were to write a rotation a rot builder, for example, this is something that you can use to implement like correct Wentz-Bohr switches and this kind of stuff, which is the main reason I'm making this, not so that you can bug abuse. But I mean, you know, I'm not saying don't bug abuse, it's not my problem. So can we get some things that what is happening in the core, core effects? Core effects is first we roll the damage, right? So if we go from min to var to 1 damage number, then we add Berserker's Fury and the armor, I think it's the Darox armor. So if your HP is different, you can do something here. So if you abil eat and you have late cores, then you get less damage. So this is important to, well, important, this is something you can remember. Store bulk, crit damage, or crit chance actually. Crit damage is decided before already, so you cannot get a more crit chance, or sorry, more crit damage the way that you get a more crit chance, unfortunately. Set bloat damage for. Actually, this might happen when you hit the down, I don't know, but let's put a question mark. Also, you have this mediocrity perk that nobody uses because it just gives you less damage, so it makes no sense to use. Other thing that happens is death spore is part of crit chance, of course. Death spore. It should maybe be noted this is not FSOA over here, because hits actually know if they, or hit splats know if they crit, right? Because you have these crit splat thingies. So FSOA is actually checked when the damage happens. So very weird why they're different, but okay. Godbook procs. And now maybe you see some interesting problem here. If you Greco and you get a Godbook proc on Greco 1, well actually you don't get any buff, right? Because here we had, in this hit section, we had full book, and here we have course. But here we get the proc. But these all happen after the hits. So even if we get the Greco 1 Godbook proc, for example, full book, we don't get the damage buff from full, or the Amaskat book, that was even earlier, right? So this is a very unfortunate thing, so to say. Of course, Jess book stores the damage after the hit happens, so Jess book will still get buffed, so to say, by the first hit ability that, or the first hit that does anything. Other things, probably I am forgetting something right now, but again, you can always ask in PVME or yeah, anywhere. Try to get some information. Okay, so now we have done the core effects. Then now we go to the final part, which is the on NPC, on damage part. On NPC, NPC/on damage. And here a bunch of extra stuff happen. You can look at the wiki for the exact order of things. A bunch of weird things happen. Meta gets calculated here. Metamorphosis, Zurkoros. Right, you would think these are on the player, but they are not for some reason. This stuff may be good to mention. Buffs, perks, poison, abilities, of course, get buffed. Everything gets buffed by this. Also here we check FSOA crit, question mark. If an ability happens here, do we apply poison? Do we apply poison? What else happens here? I'm trying to have a think about interesting effects. You have this 25 stack essence corruption. I think I mentioned assets corruption earlier as well, but it has multiple effects. So this 25 stack effect, this is on the damage stick as well, maybe I should say. Whatever, I will explain it. So this 25 stack effect happens here, but the other effect happened earlier already. So actually, on NPC, on damage, PVME terminology, again also popular streamers, on hit. So you can see the confusion. On hit is not even the same tick as the other on hit. Very confusing, perhaps. I want to test. Does this help? No. On hit is on the damage tick. Shit happens. This stuff happens. On the damage tick, which means that whatever you want to add from here needs to be active on the damage tick, right? So you can equip the Sanctum Deal Wield 25 stack effect when the damage happens, and even if you didn't cast it with the Sanctum Deal Wield, you will still get the damage bonus. I think I have explained most of the damage buffs actually, or most of the effects. I hope it has been somewhat clear also why, for example, this sunshine, what this means with that it is now a base ability damage buff in with the 3-piece 2 Mechans Resplendence. Of course, for questions you can always ask, or you can go to the PVME Discord. They will always, I mean, maybe they won't always know, but they can always tag me, or lots of people there who are very smart. So yeah, I'll just join PVME Discord in general, I would say, for any questions about PVM. Okay, thank you very much for listening to this craziness.